Welcome once again to another edition of Digging the Details with Jim and Dean. And I'd like to introduce the Dean half of that equation. He's an artist, a writer, a historian, and a very knowledgeable Disney enthusiast. As you all know from watching our previous videos together, he's Dean Brinkerhoff.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, Dean. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Jim, you are all those things and more. And I always appreciate you as a good friend and collaborator here at Tulgey TV.
Thank you, Grumio. And today we're trying something a little different. We're going to talk about our hot takes, but that usually has a negative connotation, and not all our points will be of the negative sort. So we're calling them Pixie-Dusted takes to indicate that they're going to be all over the magical world of Disney. We'll be hearing each other's takes just as you hear them. So Dean, why don't you start things off?
I think I'd like to start off in the happiest place on earth, which is, of course, Walt Disney's original park, Disneyland. I absolutely love Disneyland. It is, in my mind, the best park in the whole world, only because it's Walt Disney's personal playground. Walt Disney has his footprint, handprints, thoughts, impressions, his heart all over that area of land in Anaheim, California. And because he had such an influence, I think today it speaks so many volumes still to his inspiration, to his insights, to his personal opinions on certain things, his thoughts, his own experiences. And it's so apparent even today, 60, nearly 70 years later, that his vision was so strong and so inspiring. He definitely really wanted to share his love of certain things in the world and certain experiences he's had with all of us. And what an incredible display of, first off, art, and second off, entertainment, fun, a place where families can be together and enjoy a day out in the sun and be together. It is incredible that he was even able to accomplish his dream. Not to put aside or even disconsider any other Disney theme park in the world, but I am definitely biased more towards Disneyland for that reason. Even as great as its sister park, Disney California Adventure is, it does not come close in comparison to the original Disneyland park. And I think that a lot of people, when they first come to Disneyland, can feel bad, even if it's not always apparent in their mind why. There's just something about it that's so full of richness and details and happy memories that just permeates everything. How have you seen Walt's influence play a part in the magic of Disneyland, Jim?
Well, I can do nothing but echo what you said. Certainly all the Disney parks have a great deal to offer and, of course, reflect Walt's philosophies and approaches. Two of the greatest parks are Disney's Animal Kingdom and Tokyo Disney Sea. They are both spectacular and unique parks, but it all started at Disneyland, and Disneyland has a very unique charm, just as you said. And I think it's not only our observations about that being true, but so many who perhaps were very used to going to, say, Walt Disney World, the Magic Kingdom, and they've heard that Disneyland's smaller and weren't expecting that much. But when they come, they definitely feel, and many people have said this, they feel Walt's presence in the atmosphere. And we know that he was obviously not only created it, but there many, many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
So his presence is really felt. And I think another really important point, so many people do observe that there's a great deal of changes at Disneyland, and not all of them are that popular. But Disneyland has not changed that much. I think maybe we've talked about this before. In reality, Disneyland, expansions aside, has not changed that much since the last time Walt was there in 1966.
Yeah.
I mean, even if there are new attractions added or old ones taken out, the lands, the realms remain relatively the same. So you can still capture the feeling of Walt being there.
I agree, and I definitely think that it captures some of certain glimpses of time throughout the period of time Disneyland has been in existence. So I always find that fascinating as well, to be able to feel so emotionally connected to Walt Disney as you enter and experience the attraction in that park, and also of some of the snapshots of certain decades that have gone by, especially for those who have been at Disneyland through the decades.
This is one reason I always enjoy talking with you, and I'm sure our audience feels the same way. Your take is always about Walt. So you're conscious of that. And, you know, not everybody is. But it's important to bring that to mind at least once in a while.
Yeah, every so often.
And
I advocate for all the time, but
you're right. And you inspire me to do that more than I do. But Disneyland itself helps us to do that, which I think is a big part of your point. You can really feel Walt's imagination and inspiration, as you said, in the place itself. Well, my first take is about something Walt was intimately involved with, to say the least, and that's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And to me, it's interesting that something that a lot of people never notice, and I think it's supposed to be that way, and that is at the end of the film, when Snow White is going to ride off into her happy ending with her prince, she's saying goodbye to her friends, the Seven Dwarfs, echoing the famous scene where she kisses them goodbye earlier in the film. She kisses them goodbye, but this time it's only 6 of the dwarfs. She does not kiss Sleepy goodbye. And the other side of this coin is sometimes when people do notice that, they think, oh, how could they have left out one of the dwarfs? What a mistake. Or maybe worse yet, it was to save money. And neither of those things are true, in my opinion. I think there's very little in the film about Walt saving money. He spent enormous amounts of money. It was certainly one of the most expensive movies ever made at that point. Oh, yeah. But really by far, given the typical movie. I think it was a matter of staging and a matter of momentum. I think every single thing in Snow White was very carefully thought out. Even if it was about saving money, they would have stopped and figured, well, what's the best way to do this? And also, because Snow White is sitting up on the horse, the prince is lifting the dwarfs up to her, which is very sweet. It also implies there might be some staging challenges. To folks that might be saying, oh, it's too bad she's ignoring one of the dwarfs, well, look closely, because I think it's after she kisses Grumpy goodbye, she looks down and she waves. So she's waving goodbye. That's what's happening there. So they didn't forget. They gave her an action that showed she was incorporating all of them. And I think it's also very deliberate that it was Sleepy, because he's the one that's least likely to have some sort of big action, even though it's the prince's action, really. But he's the one that'd be a little more, just standing still, given his personality.
That makes total sense.
So she didn't leave any of them out, and I think it's a really cool indication of how carefully and beautifully that film was planned and put together.
I'm definitely going to have to look for that little wave. I don't think I've ever really, in particular, noticed that. So I'm excited to go through and see if I can find that. And I know we've had conversations, Jim, on some other sorts of things like this that are similar, where Walt Disney is very deliberate in his decisions, and of course, his team. I don't know if there's any sort of definite answer on this, but do you speculate that they may have done a few different iterations of this scene, or possibly even a storyboarded, animated her kissing Sleepy, including him, or do you think that was just from the beginning, like a decision that was made?
Well, given the process of storyboarding, I think it's very possible that different approaches were taken, and in one version he might have been included. And I would also assume that when they thought of this idea, because how was it all going to happen? That all had to be decided and planned.
Absolutely.
And of course, they were looking at different things, but it's probably the original intent was she was going to kiss all 7 of them goodbye. But in the planning of it and the thinking it out and the working it out, they left Sleepy out for a reason.
Snow White is certainly a wonderful topic, Jim. I really appreciate that. I and so many others around the world love the Disney animated features. They are some of the greatest films ever made, and a lot of people certainly have grown up with them, have them as a huge part of their lives. My most influential films from Disney are actually not the animated ones, and some that are a little overlooked. I am a huge fan of the Walt Disney live action comedies, especially in particular the ones from the late 50s through, the 70s and even on. Of course, I'm talking about films such as The Shaggy Dog, The Absent-Minded Professor, all the way through the 70s to The Strongest Men in the World, which is a sequel to the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes in the wonderful Kurt Russell series. I absolutely revere and adore these films. They are obviously not to the same artistic standard or level as maybe some of the animated features, but I strongly consider them to be as much, a Disney film as Snow White or Pinocchio, some of the wonderful classics. These films created a lot of opportunities for many great actors to further their careers. Don Knotts comes to mind as one who has had experience with a lot of television and films other than Disney, but he made a great contribution to some of these live action comedies in films such as The Apple Dumpling Gang and No Deposit, No Return, Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, a lot of films that may not even be on the radar of a lot of current Disney fans, but certainly as much as some of the animations that everyone knows and loves, these films are very special to me. Walt Disney had a lot of talent sent to work on these films, and in the 50s, 60s, I could sort of tell that there was a lot going on behind the scenes, a lot of intermixing of different creative talent in the various avenues that Walt employed. So another example would be Ed Wynn, who was obviously the wonderful voice of the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland, got to be in some of these live action comedies, and he was even involved at Disneyland in some aspects and involved in some of the other types of films Walt made, such as the musicals Babes in Toyland and Mary Poppins. I love that Disney has so many faces, so many different facets that you can enjoy, and though I may have enjoyed watching Sleeping Beauty with some of my sisters and my mother growing up, I loved watching the live action comedies with my father and my grandfather, and it's just something that can be enjoyed with various aspects of what people enjoy, I suppose. I love all aspects of Disney.
Well, that's really the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the same way. I love all aspects of Disney, and I think that's one of the greatest things about Disney is that the more you look, the more there is to discover, and the more it enhances what you already do love.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to me, the very interesting thing about the live action Disney films is that Walt and his live action team applied the same Disney storytelling elements that they created to the live action comedies, and Walt really reveled in that. He loved doing cartoon like effects in live action movies.
Yeah, that's very apparent in very many, if not all of them.
Certainly some are better than others.
Absolutely.
But if anybody hasn't experienced some of these comedies, it's well worth your while to look and see what Disney elements, and I mean storytelling elements, are there. And there's just fun discoveries to be made. You mentioned Ed Wynn and films like Babes in Toyland, and in fact, Babes in Toyland is my next take. We've already talked quite a bit about it in our previous video, but one thing that just amazes me and is so much fun, obviously this is a live action movie, but all the characters in it are designed, quote unquote, like cartoon characters. Now, as some people may know, the original plan was for it to be an animated feature. And I think maybe springing out of that all along, they were thinking of these characters in a designed way or a very cartoon-like approach. So it's not just Ed Wynn, as Ed Wynn basically looks, but his costume, sort of his appearance, he's very cartoony. Certainly, Rodrigo and Gonzorgo are very, very much cartoon characters. Henry Calvin was a rotund man in real life, but they gave him this enormous fat suit to really build up his cartoony look. Gene Sheldon, who's a shorter man, is sort of enveloped in that costume that's so exaggerated, and sometimes he'll even pull his head down into it, very much like a cartoon character. And he was very much a mime and a comedic performer and basically a clown-like performer anyhow. So he was perfect for that role and really took advantage of that cartoon approach. And even Barnaby is a very, very designed character. His shoes that are so exaggerated, they come to a point. His hat he's not wearing just a top hat, but it's like 3 times as tall as any top hat you've ever seen. A real stovepipe hat. When Ray Bolger was thought of to play Barnaby, which is not the most natural casting in the world, Walt's response was, great, he has the kind of face that I can really caricature. And that's one reason that, fitting in with the rest of the film, as I'm saying, Ray Bolger's face is so designed. His hair, his mustache, everything is a design. So the makeup and the costumes really contributed to that cartoon-like feel. And if you look at the illustrations for, like, say, the Big Golden Book, the Little Golden Book, the comic books, they're not really trying to capture the particular actor's look. They're just doing the character. You can really see it. It's really cartoony. They pulled it off magnificently in that film, and that's part of the fun. That's part of the fun of Babes in Toyland.
It's very apparent that that's what they were going for, and I think it was a clever idea, clever design choice all around. So I agree. There's a lot of fun in that film, and it's fun to revisit that one again.
We can't get away from it.
As we were talking about before, I love when a live action film can feel so animated, even though it's, reality we're looking at, how they can manipulate and alter what we see and know as, being normal, and turn it into something fantasy. I love all aspects of Disney, but one aspect in particular I really enjoy is the music. There's been a lot of songwriters at Disney throughout the years, and in fact, it seems to be a staple that they have to have a wonderful soundtrack with incredible songs, all the way from Snow White to even modern day with Encanto. There's a lot of people who really take to heart the music, and I'm certainly one of them. One of the songwriters that I really have come in more recent times to appreciate is the work and the life of Howard Ashman. Howard Ashman really had a great sense of what made a Disney film great, looking back traditionally at the WALT era, and how to revitalize that, make it fresh in a time without Walt and his, cast of wonderful filmmakers.
and take it to a place where the audience member really related. So looking at his work with The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and even some of the inspirations he gave to Aladdin.
I think Howard did a really good job at helping the Disney Studios strive to evolve into a new era, to bring something great to the screen, something that will be memorable. I absolutely wholeheartedly know he accomplished that. The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin are some of the most iconic films of the Renaissance era of the Disney animated films. And when you take a quick look at what Howard was personally going through at the time, also makes it even more special. There's a wonderful documentary out about his life and his time at the Disney studio on Disney Plus called Howard, that really sheds some light on some of those things that he was going through, in addition to the wonderful vision and insight he had throughout his whole life. And I think his contributions to the Disney studio and, you know, the world as a whole are very memorable. I always sort of tear up and feel emotional when I hear that song that was cut from Aladdin, Proud of Your Boy, because I feel that it was very personal for him and just a pure longing from his own heart of what he wanted to accomplish and what he wanted to see out of his work. And if you haven't heard that unused song from Aladdin, you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question, especially historically, that he was in the right place at the right time to really spur things on. John Musker and Ron Clements were certainly striving, as you said, to return to the classic animated feature. That's one reason a fairy tale was chosen, to try to return to the roots of Snow White and Cinderella, but with a different kind of heroine. So that in itself was inspiring. Movie musicals were really not being made so much anymore. And the stage, of course, has its limitations. He knew that in animated features you could do anything, and he had been a lifelong Disney fan. So he knew better than some people that were at Disney what a Disney animated feature should be.
Right.
So his contributions were all to that. And he was definitely a creative lead. The same with Beauty and the Beast, as you mentioned. I think maybe even more on Beauty and the Beast than The Little Mermaid, which is saying a lot.
Yeah.
But a lot of the concepts in Beauty and the Beast were his, like having the enchanted objects have personalities. That was his idea. And you look at it now and it's just like, how could it be otherwise?
Right.
But nobody else had thought of that or was going in that direction. That was all him. And of course, he has sort of helped set the stage for the animated features that were to come, too. The whole idea of very strong songs. Almost every Disney animated feature has songs, but it had been a while since they had had very strong songs that were really integral, as a musical should be. So it wasn't just a film that had some incidental songs. This was a musical. That's what Snow White was. That's what Cinderella was. That's what Sleeping Beauty was. Strong songs that could stand on their own, but also told the story and established personality, etc. So it was all a return to classic Disney. And he knew what that was.
Yeah, he pulled it off beautifully.
Speaking of musicals, I'd like to turn to Mary Poppins, and an aspect of it that a lot of people look at in a negative light. And that is, yes, it's true, Dick Van Dyke's Cockney accent. The whipping boy of this practically perfect film. Over the years, it's grown and grown and grown that some people just automatically think, without thinking about it, oh, his accent's so terrible. What a ridiculous thing. And it's very unfortunate that people seem to automatically think that now without even looking at it. For me personally, his accent has never bothered me. Is it authentic? Not really. It has aspects of a Cockney accent that are authentic. If we turn to Dick Van Dyke, he's a comedic performer. He does funny voices and does funny, exaggerated things. He was very well known for just using his body to do these crazy postures and pratfalls. So his accent is very much part of that. It's a stage dialect. It's a comedic dialect that's not meant to be real or taken to be real. And it's part of that. It's almost like a music hall thing, like a pantomime, as the British call their fanciful stage fantasies. Something you would see in that, where everything is very exaggerated. So it's part of the fun and the comedy and the artifice of the film. That's the way I've always looked at it. But there's something even more important. And this is what bothers me. This is what really bothers me about this negative attitude toward any part of his performance. Let's say that his accent is the worst thing ever. Who cares? Because the other part of Dick Van Dyke is that he is really a wonderful actor. So he not only did these comedic, exaggerated things, but he could also do the warm or dramatic scenes just as well.
Mm-hmm.
And his achievement in that film is incredible because the character of Bert is so important because he's going to say things. He's going to directly make observations and say things that Mary Poppins never would because she will not explain. You know, Bill Walsh saw Dick Van Dyke in the Dick Van Dyke Show and said, oh, he would be perfect. That's thinking outside the box.
Right, right.
Who would have thought? Most people, I'm sure, thought they would get a British actor. And they did, they were thinking along those lines. They were even thinking about Tommy Steele. I think what he saw in the Dick Van Dyke Show is exactly what we were talking about, what you see in Mary Poppins. He does these very exaggerated things. And certainly it's primarily a comedy, but Dick Van Dyke's able to perform realistically with heart and with true emotion all the other type scenes as well. Bill Walsh saw, and then certainly Walt Disney agreed, song, dance, comedy, but also somebody that was going to carry the heart and the warmth and all the other things that he's called upon to do.
Father's not in trouble. We are.
Oh, sure about that, are you? Look at it this way. You've got your mother to look after you, and Mary Poppins, and Constable Jones, and me. Who looks after your father? Tell me that. When something terrible happens, what does he do? Fends for himself, he does. Who does he tell about it? No one. Don't blab his troubles at home. He just pushes on at his job, uncomplaining and alone and silent.
He's not very silent. Michael, be quiet. But do you think Father really needs our help?
Well, not my place to say. I only observe that a father can always do with a bit of help. Come on, I'll take you home.
Sure had a lot to look forward to going into that role. Absolutely.
Now that role was written that way. It was very important they got somebody that could both achieve it and be the equal of Julie Andrews.
Uh-huh.
When you stop and think about it, he's not the most likely choice in any way, but he knocks it out of the park. So if you're going to criticize his accent, then make sure you say the other parts too. The question one should ask oneself is, if it's a fake or inauthentic or whatever you want to say about his accent, what's the reason for it? It's not just like a bad decision, or it sounds like you're saying, why did they ever cast him if he couldn't even do it?
Are you seeing the movie?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, it's just the way seems like so much of what we deal with today is everybody's looking at the negative, and it's out of ignorance.
Yeah.
To me, his performance is great. And his accent, as I said when I started this whole thing, not authentic, but not meant to be.
I think a lot of people at a surface level can kind of compare him to, you know, Julie Andrews, David Tomlinson, certainly many of the other casts that are actually of British descent, and see that stark difference, and definitely know that Dick Van Dyke is American. But as you're saying, that's the point. He is coming to this role as an American. So when you know the intention, it makes more sense.
Your point about him being American, an element is Walt was always looking at the overall picture, of course, as well as the details.
Yeah.
So he didn't want it to be too British for an American audience. And I think that's one reason he really cottoned to the idea of Dick Van Dyke doing it. And he knew that Dick Van Dyke was going to do whatever he came up with. It was going to be a fun, comedic approach. Probably thought it was terribly funny.
Right.
Just the way he would say things, rather than something very authentic. The authenticity in Mary Poppins is the heart, is the emotion. That's the authenticity. Anybody else looking for another kind of authenticity in that movie is not going to find it.
I mean, perhaps if you enjoy jumping into chalk drawings, you might find it pretty authentic. I know I don't do that on the daily as much as I would love to. My last Pixie-Dusted fact for today is one that I just discovered a week or two ago. I was very intrigued to find out as I was watching and enjoying The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which is a television series that was produced from 1988 to 1991. I realized that though Jim Cummings provides the voice for Winnie the Pooh and does so still, I had always thought that he provided the voice for Tigger in that show as well, because currently he does do both. But I was surprised to find out that Paul Winchell, who was the original voice of Tigger in the very first Winnie the Pooh cartoons made by the Disney studio, he continued to do that voice through that series as well. Now, it's true that Paul Winchell was the voice of Tigger in The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh for the first 2 seasons. However, Jim Cummings took over for the voice in the later seasons. I still think it's really neat that Paul Winchell came back to do the voice at all. So it's a neat treasure we have in those first 2 seasons to hear him in the original Tigger voice. In addition to Tigger, he also provided the voice of Zummy Gummy in the Adventures of the Gummy Bears. Now that I know this, I watched the show with a little bit of a different perspective, realizing that this is the original Tigger. And no wonder I love this series so much, especially when he's on the screen. It's a series that I think does a great job of paying homage and continuing on the stories and adventures very creatively that the original short films and later compilation film told and shared with the world. I think that it's pretty neat that Paul Winchell signed on to do this voice again and continue to provide it. A question I did want to ask you, though, Jim, is do you know of any other Disney voice actor that came back to provide a voice for a television series like this?
I think the Jim Cummings context is what does make it so amazing about Paul Winchell. They had somebody who could do it, and it is the original. But John Fiedler was the original voice of Piglet, and he performed Piglet right up until the year he died. So he had done it longer than anybody, much longer than Paul Winchell.
Now that you mention it, that simple thing to realize, I guess, but I find it fascinating and mind-blowing.
Well, I wonder how many people do assume that when they see one of those cartoons from the series.
It's probably a cheaper, you know how it goes. They always get different voices.
It really reminds us that Paul Winchell was the original. He came up with the voice. He was really a great actor. He did do a few voices, but most, as you've already mentioned, but the reason I bring it up is because he's one of the actors that really only has a few voices. It's not like he does hundreds of voices and they're all different, like maybe like more of a Mel Blanc. But he does different characterizations. He did the Tigger voice with different characters.
And a
And
certain energy.
yes, and that particular voice and a lot of the things that Tigger does, it's based on an old-time comedian, Hugh Herbert. If you ever see Hugh Herbert, you'll immediately go, oh, that's Tigger's voice. Paul Winchell made no secret of that. He said, you know, I'm doing Hugh Herbert. And he just adapted that voice for different personalities. But of course, Tigger's the most popular, most well-known, and really the one that the voice is best suited for. He's quite an actor, and you can see him in he was in many, many comedies of the 60s especially. And his whole ventriloquist act with his different dummies that he had, they had different characters. Even though you can often recognize his voice, he's always different. It's the acting that makes the difference.
In the realm of Disney voices that he did, he provided a voice in The Fox and the Hound, and the voice he did for the Aristocats. They all have a certain personality and characterization that is very unique. So you're so right.
And so much of the ventriloquist act, it was created by Paul Winchell. A lot of it was just off the top of his head.
I'm even fascinated to know that he was a ventriloquist, and maybe for historians of Paul Winchell, that's a pretty basic thing, but I'm excited to delve deeper into that and explore some of those routines. It's a fairly new thing to me.
I think there's probably a lot of people watching that didn't know that the actor who was the voice of Tigger was also a ventriloquist.
It kind of makes sense in my head, so I'm thrilled to know that there's more Paul Winchell to explore.
So we'd like to thank everyone for watching our Digging the Details video. We'll be back soon with another edition of Digging the Details. Who knows what the topic will be that time? But in the meantime, he's Dean.
And he's Jim.
And we'll see you next time on Digging the Details.